Pisa. A nice option to offer to tourists who already are in Florence is Pisa. This is a destination, very common indeed, for cruise line passengers, that disembark in Livorno. Obviously here the main attraction is the ultra-famous Pisa Leaning Tower, but within the same square called Piazza di Miracoli, you also have the baptistry, and of great importance the Duomo of Pisa. On the side you have the Camposanto Monumentale, on the opposite side you have the Museo del Sinope. Pisa Tower construction. In 1174, engineer Bonino Pisano laid a marble foundation quite large enough and started building the campanile for the cathedral and baptistry of Pisa. The Romanesque Tower of Pisa, comprising 14,000 tons of white marble, was completed 176 years later, but it was also embarrassingly crooked. Because there was a lot of water under the ground in this area, Bonino was able to place the foundation only about 10 feet down into the ground. As the first story of the tower was completed, the south side began to sink. The builders tried to make it look better by building the columns and arches on the south side about an inch taller than those on the north side. However, by the time they got to the fourth story, they had to make the southern columns 2 inches taller than the northern ones. The tower just continued to lean, and because of the difficulties the construction was stopped. In 1234, the architect Benedetto discovered that the tower was leaning even more. Now the south side of the fourth story was a full 6 inches shorter than the north side. He added a fifth story, again making the south columns taller than the north ones. After adding that one story, Benedetto gave up, and again construction on the tower stopped. Almost 30 years later, in 1260, William of Innsbruck added the 6th and 7th stories to the Tower of Pisa. In 1350 Tommaso Pisano started work on the 8th story of the tower, the bell chamber. He found that the tower was still sinking, and so he made the spiral stairs inside the tower and the wall of the bell chamber higher on the south side than on the north. The tower was finally completed in 1372, almost 200 years after it was begun, and it was still leaning. Stabilization works. The Pisa Tower was closed to the public on January 7, 1990, after more than 2 decades of stabilization studies. The bells were removed to relieve some weight, and cables were cinched around the third level and anchored several hundred meters away. Apartments and houses in the path of a potential fall of the tower were vacated for safety. The selected method for preventing the collapse of the tower was to slightly reduce its tilt to a safer angle by removing 38 cubic meters of soil from underneath the raised end. The tower's tilt was reduced by 45 centimeters, returning to its 1838 position. After a decade of corrective reconstruction and stabilization efforts, the tower was reopened to the public on December 15, 2001, and was declared stable for at least another 300 years. After a phase, 1990 to 2001, of structural strengthening, the tower has been undergoing gradual surface restoration to repair visible damage, mostly corrosion and blackening. These are particularly pronounced due to the tower's age and its exposure to wind and rain. In May 2008, engineers announced that the tower had been stabilized such that it had stopped moving for the first time in its history. They stated that it would be stable for at least 200 years. The tower now gently tilts 4 degrees, it is stable and in good health. Piazza dei Cavalieri. Piazza dei Cavalieri, lit. Knights Square, is a landmark in Pisa, Italy, and the second main square of the city. This square was the political center in medieval Pisa. After the middle of 16th century the square became the headquarters of the Order of the Knights of St. Stephen. Now it is a center of education. Renaissance. On this square the emissary of Florence proclaimed the end of the independence of Pisa in 1406. After the conquest of Pisa, the buildings remained the same, but changed public offices, a Florentine commissioner and the priors instead of the elders, and a chief of custody instead of the captain of the people. Later, in 1558, the square was rebuilt in Renaissance style by Giorgio Vasari, the famous architect of the Grand Duke Cosimo I de' Medici of Florence. He designed the Church of the Knights of the Holy and Military Order of St. Stephen. It replaced the Church of St. Sebastian. This is the only church in Pisa in Renaissance style. It contains Turkish naval banners captured by the Knights of St. Stephen during the naval battle of Lepanto on October 7, 1571. Main building on the square is Palazzo della Caravana, the Palace of the Knights of St. Stephen, and formerly the Palace of the Elders. It was modernized in Renaissance style by Giorgio Vasari. The facade is decorated with sgraffiti, equally by Vasari, and contains 6 niches with busts of Grand Dukes of Tuscany. In front of the palace stands the large statue of Cosimo I de' Medici by Pietro Francavilla, who also designed the Palace of the Priors in 1603. In the other corner of the square stands the Palazzo dell'Orologio, which is referred to in Dante's Inferno. 20th century. Nowadays the Palazzo della Caravana houses the main building of the Scuola Normale Superiore di Pisa, a university founded by Napoleon Bonaparte and modeled after the École Normale Supérieure of Paris. Italian poet Giosuè Carducci and physicist Enrico Fermi are among some of the pupils who have studied here. There is also the House of the Confraternita della Misericordia, a Catholic ambulance service,